So I got an email from somebody in class, and this was the email, and I thought, Lori and I have pondered this a lot, and this issue, and I understand this is not. I think there's something, especially in maybe, I don't know if it's true, it's every generation. It's when I was young too. You see somebody who's like my age, and you just, there's just a sense that people of a certain age have stopped really getting things. They stopped understanding, right? They stopped being activists. They stopped understanding what activism is. They got conservative. The whole thing. That's not always true, okay? But what happens is sometimes some of us develop a different kind of understanding. I've done a lot of activism at Penn State. A lot of activism at Penn State, and marches that we've done, and even out of this class, all sorts of things, right? So let me just say a couple things, right? The Proud Boys are, I would say, an extremist group, and I would say this guy who is here, and I'm not even going to say what his name is, because saying his name, it just almost validates it, right? It's like, look, he supports violence, okay, and violence against people like me. And I don't know anybody else in this room, but I've had death threats. So I'm by people that the people like him have activated. So by doing things like he was going to do this particular night, right? So I'm coming to this from a certain place of whoa, what the hell, So my thinking then is. Where I've come to is that we're in actually a much larger, more precarious place in the world than it would first appear. And I think we're actually treading on really, really dangerous waters. I think I'm really afraid, not so much afraid for me, you know what I mean? I mean, death threats or whatever, I don't think about that very much, but I think we as a society, and in lots of different ways, very precarious. And I think the activism, like students and community members demonstrated that night in October, is not the activism. It was not the best way to respond. And I'm going to say why. Because it was pretty clear, and I think you heard from Damon the other day, the university's hands were tied. And they're tied for good reason, because they're supporting free speech. And those of you who are women, who are minoritized in any way, you're either part of the queer community, women, disabled community, black or brown or religious minorities, you are going to be the first people whose rights are taken away once we start stripping away rights. Me, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm a straight white man. I have sufficient class, clout, and money at this stage in my life. I'm fine. You know what I mean? No one's going to take, because I'm going to work my way around it. If you come after my rights, I can afford to work around it somehow, so you're not going to ever really take my rights. But you, and those of you in the classroom who are minoritized in some way, once we start stripping rights a little bit, you're the first ones who are going to get hurt. And so Penn State basically said from the very beginning, there's nothing we can do. Really, this is a free speech thing. Secondly, the student group, who we at Penn State, we spent 15 years, my whole time here, 31 years, we spent time working with Penn State students to find the best possible ways in which student groups could control their own money, because trust me, it didn't used to be this way. Penn State would control which groups got it, and now it's all students. And so we found the best possible way, and we can't just go and change that because somebody is bringing someone who you don't like and who really is even dangerous, okay? Because we say extremist here, but I'm just going to assume extremist for a moment, right? So, because those are words that when you say those words, it's like when you call someone a racist, you're now in a whole different category of reality. So when you use that, okay? So the university, from the president on down, said, we're not canceling the group. We're not taking their money away. This is a contract we have with Penn State students and a contract we have with the Constitution. There's no way we're going to do that. So from my perspective, what students could have done was realize, you know what? They're on our side. Because the president called them extremists. Damon called them extremists. They're on our side. So hang on, we're all in the same boat here. So what if we sit down with the administration and say okay, y'all, right? What are we going to do here? Because we're in trouble. This is problematic. What are we going to do? But didn't take that route. And instead, you see a sign that's Damon Sims supports white terror or whatever. And I'm just does that make sense to you?
No, it makes complete sense. It's just, I think, against nature of university students to let something like that slide and to not do something like a protest, because I think it's kind of just within the nature to want to protest something. I think saying you should have just completely disregarded it and keep it silent, I understand that point of view completely, and that in some scenarios that is the best case scenario, that's the best route to go. It's just when you see something like your money, because most students here pay an extreme amount of money to come to this university, and to see even part of it, the smallest bit of it, go to something like that, it's going to make people angry. And so I think it's just an impossible scenario where students wouldn't want to protest and go against Penn State's wishes in that sense.
Okay, so first, I want to say the disappointment on my side was that so few students actually did protest, right? As much as why aren't you all Dude, it's just do you know who these people represent? Why aren't you out of your minds? And mostly not. Why? So actually, it's not actually not in the sort of DNA of students to protest. It's the DNA of most students to just be whatever.
I would say most students aren't very politically active, and if you said his name, would be who? If you said the Proud Boys, you're going to be who? They're not going to understand. It's only the people that are aware, I feel would be ones to protest, which is a smaller portion of the population.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here, let me say this. I wasn't so right now, and the other day I wasn't suggesting, I did, but we didn't have enough time, right? My first response was the crickets response, right? Just nobody go. First off, there probably would have been about a dozen students that would have showed up, because the vast majority of students who would show up to see the conflict. That's what happened when Milo was here. So it's okay, so that's the crickets idea. Just nothing. But meet with the university to say, not let's do nothing, but what could we do that would be an ideal, beneficial, and powerful response to these two knuckleheads who are coming to this campus and who are going to take home money that we Penn State students have paid. What's some kind of thing that we could do that would be really stick it to them, right? That's would be my take. But I understand. I appreciate your response, and I it's depressing. And hang on, it's uplifting because I like that DNA with students. It's a little bit depressing that not more students are activated, right? But this is the story of my life, right? So well, whatever. So, okay, so
I was just going to say, it's just the students that are aware, I feel they see the growing, extremist right. And we saw it this weekend with the amount of drag shows that were being shut down by protesters and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's you think about it we shut down something with protests, but is it morally different in that sense? Because that's the hard part.
Dude, that's the hard part. Because
they were threatening these drag shows, and there was I think 3. There was one there was one that literally had a shooting involved because they vandalized the thing to get the electricity shut down in the whole city. Yeah. So it's hard, I know, to differentiate between what's good protesting the shutdown speech and what's bad protesting the shutdown speech, and it's a hard line to walk. So I completely understand that.
I love that response. And here's the issue. You have to remember that who the oppressor is here. The people that support those knuckleheads who would have been down, or the people who are shutting down drag shows, They think people supporting drag shows are the oppressors, right? They think the liberal college students who were protesting these speakers are the oppressors, right? I don't think that. But like you got to, this is the intellectual work that we're all doing here. You got to take a step back and be like, wow, what are they seeing? And here's my next step. Can you go to the next slide? So these are the Oath Keepers, right? This was taken at the Capitol Hill. Like we are becoming a mobilized militia society. Like these folks right here. I'm going to say this to you. They don't give a damn about your protest signs, man. They got guns, they got weapons, they got bullets. They're ready to go to war. If you show up with protest signs, down like Oath Keepers suck or whatever it is, that means nothing to them, man. These folks are ready to go to war. And I'm like, holy shit. In my thing, and the last thing I said the other day is like, in a way, what happened the other day, because several weeks ago, was like, y'all, by that response, just gave these folks more ammunition to be like, okay, now we really see who our targets are at universities and this kind of thing. So like, okay, got that. And I'm like, y'all, like, you don't, I get the protest thing and I get students, it's cool to protest, but you got to understand you're going up against a growing army of people who are ready to kill and die for their ideas, and you're not ready to kill and die for your ideas. Maybe a few of you are, but the vast majority are not. This is not a game here, right? And I'm like, I'm really scared. And so I look at these guys and I'm just like, oh man, okay. So put your protest signs together, but wear a protective vest because you're going to need that. And then, here, let me show, go ahead. This is the power grid in go to the next slide. This is the power grid in North Carolina. They think that the people who did this, they were shutting down the drag show, right? It's like, dudes, this is the book, this is right out of how to have a revolution in a society. You start by mobilizing your people, and the Oath Keepers are all former military, and there's about 20 million former military in the United States. The vast majority of them are not engaged in something like the Oath Keepers, but we don't know how many of them actually really kind of sit back and support. And once the shooting starts, a lot of these other folks are going to be right on board. And so, this is like, y'all, damn, man. It starts, you put your militia together, then you start going after targets that are going to impact the civilian population, and then you go after the civilian population. You don't go after military and police. And they're following, this is a textbook case. If you study militias and the violence in the United States, they're following this textbook. This is what happens all over the world with people who study the breakdown of a society. So I'm like, okay, response.
To me, I just don't think a student protest, in the sense that maybe it's important to the local community and the university. Yeah. I think it's a drop in the bucket for the reasons why those guys do what they do, because it doesn't matter what sensible thing university students do or normal people do. They are so ingrained into the propaganda that's being spread to them that it wouldn't matter if something logical happens. They're going to move it and mix it and make it something that they can disagree with or they can be violent about. And the commentators perpetuate this. And it's just, I don't think the university not wanting a protest or, needing to shut down the protest, for being violent is going to change that fact at all.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Exactly.
Okay. Great response, right? Very cool response. And what I will say is that it is one of many different drops in the bucket. Mm-hmm. And so I hear you. I agree. This is not okay, whatever, right? But this made big global news, right? It made global news because I had colleagues from around the world going yo, what's going on at Penn State? What happened there, right? So it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop, and you get many of these drops. in this whole sense that universities have gone off the rails. And like, okay, it's some point somebody's got to stop it.
Yeah,
you know?
I just think even if this protest didn't happen, and protests around like college campuses didn't happen that very often, the simple fact that you're teaching a class called race, ethnicity, and culture would be a reason that the university are like liberal propaganding machines and communists and whatever. Like the fact that there's a woman studies like major or there's a gender studies major or something like that is a reason why the colleges are, liberal machines.
Bastions.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just what else was I going to say? There's something. I think we're too far gone at this point.
Well, hang on, don't say that yet.
Okay, not to worry.
You can't say, I can say that. You can't say that. All right.
Not to say we're too far gone. I just, from what I've been viewing in the, 7 years I've been studying politics in my life, I think the way extremist groups are reacting now is, I don't think anything a logical person says is going to change their minds.
Okay, kind of like with extremist college students, like who are acting in some kind of extremist way. There's nothing anybody could say that would change their minds, which is why, for example, I said nothing about this event coming. In the past, I would have been really right out front trying to mobilize all the student groups. Things have changed, y'all, right? Things used to be really different. Social 18 used to be a hub of mobilizing activity, right? It was everybody, the student leaders and all the organizations, they were always somebody in 119, different groups of people in 119. This is where a lot of stuff would happen. And then people would go out and there'd be all sorts of marches and protests and so on. Look, let me just say one thing here. Can you look, I want to show you a graph because this is the fading American dream, right? So back in the 1940, 92% of all children could expect to earn more money than their parents. When I was born in 1960, it's about 65%. And now, this was children born in 85, but now we've gone beyond that. And the number is down to about 44%. 43 or 44% of everybody born today who might earn more than their parents. People are like, the folks that are here, these folks right here, these folks, they're not just politicized angry. They're angry because they're not doing well. And if you're not, you privileged college students, you elite college students, if you don't understand where some of these folks are coming from, man, they have a real gripe. They have a real beef. And so this is, if the territory of the United States, have I shown this semester?
Not positive.
Look, if the territory of the U.S. were divided in the same way as wealth, the richest 1% would own that much of the U.S., the next 9%, so that the richest 10% would own that much of the U.S., 30% would own this, 20% this, and the poorest 40% would own this. And these guys back here, they're in the poorest 40 to 60%, meaning this is where they're at down here. And they have the idea that where all this went, all the wealth that we used to have, that their parents had, that they were expecting when they were young, it all went to black and brown people. And damn. And to some degree, it's right, because the black and brown population has grown to a great degree. And, half of all black Americans are middle class or better. Okay. So it's if you look at this, it's these people, they're pissed at the wrong people. They should be pissed at these people, but they're not, and they don't understand that. But whatever, here we are. And so for me, it's man, you got to understand, as unpalatable as these folks might be, people like you have got to understand where they're coming from, or else we're never going to.
I completely understand. I'm a low-income student who's here on grants, and the fact that my mom works a service job, a dining job at Penn State that gets me through university. I completely understand where that 1% is. I just happen to be fed, quote unquote, different propaganda, considered to them, that pushed me over to a different side with different solutions on how to solve income inequality and not being angry at the wrong people. But I completely get where they're coming from. My father is one of those people. So I know.
Yeah, so you got that. And for me, my take is always, so that's good, like you see that. And I think a lot of people don't. And I think that this is a thing that, this is where the conversation goes, right? This is where we need to be.